Welcome everybody to session number 8 of Parent University for the 21-22 fall semester here at SUHSD Union High School District. We have with us once again Dr. Appel, Morgan Appel from UCSD, who has been conducting our previous 7 sessions. I can't believe we were already at number 8. It went faster than I thought.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, every Tuesday we've been meeting up for the last 8 weeks, not including obviously the fall break. But today we'll be wrapping up this session. As I mentioned before the meeting started, we do have interpretation in Spanish. Si ocupan interpretación en español, aprieten al globito y escojan el idioma de español. If you need interpretation in Spanish, click on the little globe on the bottom and select the Spanish language interpretation, today being conducted by our wonderful Ms. Martinez. In addition, you know that this is being recorded, so we'll be adding this to our YouTube channel. Thank you very much for those of you who have been watching on YouTube. At the end of this session, we will upload this to that YouTube channel. And also we will be looking and maybe emailing some of you regarding your certificates. We want to make sure we have everybody's correct information, that we have not only the correct information, but also that we have, if you missed a session or for some reason your cognitivity went down, we want to make sure we clarify that as well, so that there is, so we can send you out your certificates. Other than Ms. Delgado sends her welcome. She unfortunately is not going to be able to be with us for this session, but she just wanted to send her thanks for all your hard work, Dr. Appel, as well as for all of our parents who keep showing up to learn about how to support their students and how to move forward in their students' education, because ultimately that's our goal here at SUHSD Union High School District, to make sure that all of our students have the opportunity to attend whatever type of institution they choose to after they leave us. So with that, Dr. Appel, take it away.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Dominguez. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank you for your steadfast efforts and your wonderful hosting of these sessions. I too cannot believe that we are at session number 8, and really a curriculum like this where we're diving deep into post-secondary opportunities. When we look at it, at least the curriculum that we offer for our students, it takes almost 2 years. So everybody's been getting this in a way that is sort of fast and furious. And I know that there are likely to be additional questions afterwards, or if people have specific requests, they can always contact me. I also want to thank Ms. Martinez for a wonderful job at translating and hopefully making me sound good in Spanish, making me sound well-versed in Spanish. I do speak Spanish to a certain extent, but really not up to the level that would be required here. So thank you, Ms. Martinez, for being my voice. And of course, to Ms. Delgado, if you are watching this later, thank you for your steadfast support over the years. And we look forward to our ongoing collaboration around different topics of interest as we move forward. But I think most importantly, I want to thank all of you, whether you are here live and have been here live with us for every Tuesday, or whether you are watching at home by YouTube or some other means. Thank you. Asking you to take an hour out of your day, especially when we are really backed up to the holidays. I know that everyone is busy, and having you spend the time with me is so very much important. So I thank you for inviting me not only into your communities, but also into your homes, as you have been invited into mine. So here we are at session number 8, and we've come rather a long way on our journey. And one of the things that came to my attention by email is maybe talking a little bit more about CTE pathways, career tech pathways, of vocational schools or apprenticeship. So I didn't want that to fall by the wayside. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about that. Now, again, when we talk about vocational schools, some will have called them trade schools, but these are certificate programs. In some cases, they may be degree programs that are associated with sort of these high-skill jobs. So if you look at things like automotive technicians, medical assistants, hairstylists, certified nursing aides, CNA programs, electronics technicians, paralegals, and truck drivers, those types of positions. Now you can find vocational opportunities in a variety of different types of schools. So they're not only private schools, but a lot of these opportunities are available through community colleges, as well as through extended studies programs like my own. So for example, anybody who's interested in becoming a paralegal and getting their feet wet in the legal industry can come to UC San Diego Extension and earn a paralegal certificate. There are schools out there, and I think the good number of reputable schools out there also find employers and help students apply for jobs upon completion, or maybe work with them for internships. Now, the good part of these schools are legitimate, and they teach skills necessary to get a good job. Others are not as reputable. I think we are very familiar with some of the trade schools that have been shuttered by the government or have gone out of business, and they tend to overpromise. So what I wanted to be able to do is to speak with all of you today about how you can make a good decision. If you are pursuing, or if your son or your daughter is thinking of pursuing a vocational opportunity, how do you make a good decision there? Now, there are a lot of lists of vocational schools that are available online. So if you type in trade schools, you will just find list after list after list after list. And I went through them earlier today, and I found that on some of these lists, there were schools that were somewhat less less than reputable. I found schools there that had gone out of business. So I think when we start looking at these, you want to start with local, state, and federal governments as the most reliable sources. So what I've included here in the slide, and something that you can click on or copy, is a government website. This is a federal government website called trainingproviderresults.gov. And when you see gov, that means it's a government website, and this will provide you with a listing of government sanctioned trade schools. Now, of course, you're more than welcome to visit some of the other sites. There are also sites that are available through the state of California, which I'll show you on the next slide. But I think when you engage a trade school, or actually when you engage any type of school, you want to be able to ask some very important questions. You want to be able to ask, what kinds of jobs will I qualify for upon completion of my studies? What kind of certifications am I going to earn? So am I going to earn a certificate? Is it a degree? Is it some kind of a license? And where can these be used? Now, I mentioned this as a somewhat of an important thing to consider, because I had a nephew who was an incredibly talented visual artist. And upon completion of high school, his grades weren't the best, and he received a big scholarship offer from an arts vocational school that is now defunct. And they were able to lure him in with the promise of financial aid that only lasted a year. And thereafter, he wasn't really able to pay. So he wanted to see if his units would be transferable to a community college or a state university. And it turns out that they weren't. So it's really very, very important to ask about the kinds of credits that are earned. Are they transferable? And in certain cases, it may not be important that they are, but if they are, where are they transferable? And I think when we think of the community colleges are a great place to look at vocational training, and certainly with units that are transferable. You want to ask about specific connections to business and industry. So do they have externship programs? Do they have internship programs? Do they lead to apprenticeship programs? Do they have companies to which they are connected to help find employment? You always want to look at the qualifications of faculty and staff. And a reputable institution will probably either have a catalog or a brochure. You can find them online, but you want to make sure that they are qualified and up to date on their training. So if they are in automotive, what kind of automotive certifications do they have? And finally, take a tour of the facility when you're able, and if you're able, or even take a virtual tour to make sure that the facilities and the materials that are used are current in the industry and or state of the art, because you don't want to be trained to use tools that are no longer being used. Just being a smart consumer. This is a picture of ITT Technical Institute that was closed some years ago now, I believe. And you don't want to wind up in a situation like that, certainly. Some other questions that you might want to ask. If there are tools and supplies involved, in addition to books, will I have to pay for these myself or are these provided to me? Is it possible to speak with current students or alumni about their experiences? And if they say no, you could always turn online and do a search of the institution and get some commentary about it. But it's really important to speak with those who are enrolled currently. What are they thinking? What are, what are their experiences like? And alumni, are the alumni employed? What sort of interaction did they have between the school and their industry of choice? What is the completion rate at your school? So how many finish? What is the percentage or what is the absolute number? And how much debt will I have upon completion? Because again, it's easy to be lured in by 1 or 2 year scholarships, but if it doesn't get you where you need to go, you do have to be concerned. Does the school get many complaints? And I will imagine that the school themselves will probably say, no, we're grand. But you can check that online just by doing a search. Has it changed identities frequently? So for some operators that are not as legitimate as they should be, you can find that they will change their name again and again. As different holding companies will buy them out, and they will change hands frequently. So, make sure that this is a school that is stable and has been around for a while. Now, is there undue pressure to enroll? And this isn't solely vocational or tech schools. There are a lot of private for-profit colleges that won't let you get through to see what courses are like or anything else until you speak to a counselor on the telephone, and you may get the heavy sell, the sales pressure pitch. So if you are feeling undue pressure, if you're feeling like it is a little too much, if it's more than a sales pitch than it is good information, it's something to be skeptical about. Now, when we talk about financial aid, and I mention it here specifically because some of these schools are very expensive to enroll and to complete. So there is a website that I have on the slide. It's from the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau that will measure your financial aid package and provide some insight into whether it is a decent package or some things to consider. That is something that's free of charge, offered by the CFPB as a way to look out for potential students. As you know, student loans has become really the highest level of debt in the United States, exceeding mortgages and credit cards combined. And there are, again, a lot of unscrupulous operators who have made a lot of promises, but people get into so much debt that they are unable to pay it back within their lifetime. So you can always check out your financial aid package and measure it through this government source. So that is sort of a look at vocational schools, a look at trade schools. From my vantage point, I think you will find great experiences at the community colleges, which offer a lot of voc tech types of certifications and degrees. So definitely do start there. You have a wonderful resource in the form of Southwestern College, and certainly the colleges spread throughout the region. Now, a bit of a shade of difference in terms of vocation is internships and apprenticeships. So when we look at apprenticeships, it is a industry-driven career pathway where employers develop and prepare their future workforce. Some of this is done through paid work experience. Most apprenticeships with which I am familiar are paid. Some of them come through labor unions, others in different areas such as life sciences and aerospace. But you can obtain paid work experience. There could be classroom instruction and more regularly and more frequently, apprenticeship programs are teaming up with colleges and universities to offer credit for their training through extended studies programs like my own. And it is a nationally recognized credential, especially if it is developed in a particular industry. So for example, we look at electrical engineers, those who do electricity unions, those credentials are transportable. And what we find with apprenticeships, according to the latest data available, is that 95% of those who complete apprenticeships retain positions paying over $70,000 per annum to start. So if your son or daughter has not really made the decision about going to college, or maybe would like some real world experience first, or maybe is hesitant about going straight into a job, they may want to consider an apprenticeship or an internship. The program that I mentioned, we offer through UC San Diego Extension, our Futures program, which is a workforce development program in the life sciences and technology, business management, CAD, computer-aided design, and others actually lead into an internship or an apprenticeship. But what you can do is you can always visit www.apprenticeship.gov for additional information. And they have apprenticeship finders, which is, again, a great place to start. You can do an apprenticeship perhaps as a companion to your journey at a vocational school, or even after completing a college degree. So an apprenticeship is not solely reserved for high school graduates or people in high school. You can complete a degree and enter an industry. It's a great way to become fast-tracked in a career. It is a great way to explore something to make sure it is the right fit for you. And a variety of different types of fields. So aerospace, healthcare, and engineering, biotechnology around San Diego are big areas for apprenticeship. And often only a high school diploma is needed to begin. So it's a great way, again, to get familiar with an industry, to test it, to see if it is right for you in a variety of different roles within an industry. Now, from the US government, if you go to that site, apprenticeship.gov, you can go to the apprenticeship job finder, and you can look nationally. So if there is something specific in another state that you can locate, and it's almost like going away to college. But if you're interested in sticking around the Golden State, or if you're interested in sticking around California, San Diego area, you can go to our Department of Industrial Relations at the state, and that is dir.ca.gov. And it is a database where you can search for available apprenticeships by county. So again, another viable option So we've looked at gap years in some detail. We've looked at college and universities in some detail. And this is yet another option. I think you will find that our young adults have more options today than they ever have in the past. So again, just something to consider. Now, getting back to what happens after high school. Now, whether it's college or whether it's on-the-job training, whether it's a gap year experience or an apprenticeship, just remember that your sons and daughters are still forming their identity. If you remember from our discussion of socio-emotional development, we know that even at 18, 19, and 20, they're still trying to really figure out who they are. So within and outside of college, newfound freedoms and responsibilities shape who we are and who we wish to be. And if your son or daughter is in college, you may find that that changes every year as they become more mature. Empathy and guidance, incredibly important. Always expect changes and you'll never be surprised. But even more important than empathy, more important than guidance is patience. I thought I drove my parents crazy when I was in middle school and high school, but I also did not do them any favors in college as I continued to switch majors and wanted to go to different places. So definitely always expect to be surprised, and you never will be surprised. And just remember how you were at that age. And it's also very important to remember that whether you are in a Voc Tech program or whether you are in a college or university program, the workload is hard. It's time consuming and it's exhausting. And it's easy for your son or daughter to feel discouraged. They are not going to tell you if they feel discouraged, but you want to be able to subtly reinforce this idea of growth mindset. Keep letting them know that they can do it and understand that there is something important to being there. So if you are in an apprenticeship, there is something important being on that company's campus. If you are in college, it's important to be there because of what these opportunities have to offer, not only academically, but also socially and professionally. I had a nephew who attended UC Davis, but he spent most all of his time in his dormitory room because he was very much an introvert. And although he graduated with a double major magna cum laude, he was unable to apply to graduate school or find a job thereafter because he never networked. He never had the confidence to approach a professor for a letter of recommendation. So remember, there's something to be said for being on campus. And it's easy to get distracted. So your role as a parent is really the same as it has always been, but this time really being a guide on the side and supporting problem solving without solving problems for them. And, they may have been big fish in a small pond when they were in high school, but now you will find, especially on university campuses, everybody's a big fish. The only difference is instead of being a big fish in a small pond, you are a big fish in the ocean and you are swimming with other big fish, including sharks. Everybody is smart. Everybody is competitive. So just be mindful of that. So when you see your son or your daughter, you know what they're facing. We also have to understand that our young adults wear an emotional suit of armor. They want to show you that everything is okay. And we all have an idealized version of what college life is going to be like. And to be honest, it really never lives up to that because the movies never show people who are nervous, people who are anxious, people who are lonely, or people are sad. So we're told that the years after high school should be the best of our lives, but that's a lot of pressure to put upon someone. So just being aware of pressures is important. Again, anticipating change. Your routine is going to be interrupted. Your relationship with your son or daughter is going to be different, but realize that it's not going to be easy. but it is manageable and it's well worth it for everyone, not just you, not just your son or daughter, but siblings and others. Um, and, these days, everybody learns and makes sense of things together. That is precisely why we have engagements like Parent University, and we have special programs for parents and siblings when the young adults come to us as students for the first year. And definitely make sure that it's not all hands off. There are some noteworthy milestones that are designed to be shared by the university. For example, things like move-in, things like family days, graduations, and award ceremonies. This should not preclude you at all from helping with scheduling and organizing and other aspects that makes all the difference in the world. These kids are absolutely overwhelmed, whether they're in an apprenticeship or whether they're in a gap year. So an extra set of hands, an extra set of eyes means everything. Becoming familiar with campus resources. This does not mean that you have to know anything and everything, but just be aware. Just be aware of where kids can turn, especially if they're up to their necks. Being a good listener, being a shoulder to cry on, an unexpected care package or a home cooked meal. And believe me, everybody has second thoughts. Everybody wonders if they belong. Everybody wonders if they made the right decision. So just be aware that your kids may be thinking this and they may communicate that to you. It's nothing to worry about. They find their rhythm. And, if you don't see, so for example, if your kids wind up at UC San Diego, if they wind up at San Diego State, it may impact the number of visits home. So just realize, even though they may not be there with you, that they care, that they are thinking of you, but they are making the most of their lives at school. And make sure that you understand that although your son or daughter is going to be exposed to all sorts of new people, all sorts of new ideas, and all sorts of experiences, what you have taught them helps them to navigate these new ways of thinking. And, your values will stick with them. They're going to be difficult conversations to have, especially when your son or daughter comes home for a weekend or for the summer. So, while they're away, this idea of my house, my rules does not apply to them. But you still have a significant influence upon their behavior. They're still developing cognitively, they're still developing socio-emotionally. The best thing you can do is be there with facts, that you can be a sounding board for ideas and for making good decisions. Sometimes they just need to talk it out in front of someone without having anyone say things. I remember there was a point at which I was committed to dropping out of college, and I went to visit my mom. She made me a cup of tea and she just listened. And I actually talked myself out of dropping out. So being a good listener is so incredibly important. And just remember, your kids are technically adults. However, you are still their first mentors and their first teachers, and they value what you say. Now, coming home for break, that will be an interesting experience. You may see that their personalities have changed. They may seem a little bit more independent. However, they still have a lot of connections to you. And really, it's all about that first summer home when they're out all hours of the day and all hours of the night. It's about communicating. It's about being flexible. It's about finding common ground, expressing your concerns. So even though they've been away and they're incredibly independent, they're still connected to you, but in a different way. Now, one of the things I wanted to make sure that we had some time to do is to talk about some of the terms and words that you may hear in your discussions with your son or daughter from the first, second, third, or fourth year of school. And you may be familiar with some of these may be a little bit less so, but things like academic probation. And this is a point at which your son or daughter may be on a probationary status because of grades or other academic reasons. So it's very important, if they are on academic probation, that they find a way to resolve that and bring their GPA up so they are not excluded from college. So if you hear them talking about academic probation, it may be that they need a tutor, it may be that they need to meet with a counselor, but it's something very important. The add or drop period, this is the period at which you can add a class or drop a class without penalties. A lot of problems that students at college run into is they find that they're not doing well. They miss the drop period, so they can drop from a class without it impacting their GPAs, and wind up with either an incomplete or withdrawal or a bad grade. So this is part of the information when you first register for classes that is given. An audit, this is where a student or a learner will sit in on a class, but not be graded for it. It's almost like being an observer. So they won't be graded, they won't get credit for it, but it's a good way to see if this is a field in which they might be interested. And a number of faculty do allow a certain number of audits in their classes. Chancellor, you may read in the newspaper, you may hear from your son or daughter, or you may be familiar with the term. The term chancellor means something different for each of these types of institutions. So for example, at the University of California, the chancellor is the head of all of the campus. So we have a chancellor at UC San Diego, there's a chancellor at UCLA, there's a chancellor at Cal. For the California State University, the chancellor oversees the entirety of the California State University system, and each campus is overseen by a president. So you may hear the word chancellor here and there. Course load, that's just the number of units or number of courses that somebody takes. We usually recommend about 12 units per quarter, and it will differ if it's the semester system, and we'll talk about the academic calendar. But if students want to take more, they usually will have to petition. Sometimes it's so you can graduate on time or graduate early. Credit hours or units, that is the credit that you receive for successfully completing a class. So we are talking about a quarter class, or we're talking about a semester class, and credits and units is just what you receive for participating. So if you take something as an audit, you wouldn't get any of that. But it is important to monitor the number of credit hours because that speaks to graduation time. Dean, at least in our system, the dean heads up a department or a division. So there is a dean of extended studies, there is a dean of social sciences at UC San Diego. I am an assistant dean, which is a little bit further down the food chain, but that is the chief academic administrator in most cases. In some colleges and universities, the dean is the head of the college, but that is becoming rarer now. Electives, these are courses within a given field of study that are not required, that you can take for interest and to fulfill general requirements for a particular major. So most courses of study will have courses that are required, and then you can pick from among different areas of interest. Now, FERPA is an interesting concept, and that is the Family Education Rights Privacy Act. So when a child is enrolled in a university, when the child is enrolled in post-secondary education, whether they are 18 or below 18, they become the student of record. They receive the academic records. So if parents, for example, are worried about, you're worried about your son or your daughter, and they're a sophomore at the university, and you call up and you ask for their academic records, we are not allowed to release them. If you have a high school student who is enrolled in one of our programs through the university, we are not allowed to release academic records unless we have specific permission from the student. So when we do pre-college programming that offers credit, we will ask for the kids and parents to sign a FERPA waiver, which allows us to give you as parents the academic information. So I mention this because we get calls all the time, whether it is from parents, or whether it is from a spouse, or whether it is from a company who is sending their employees as students. They'll say, we want to know if they're doing well academically. Are they passing their classes? And we're unable to release that information. Full-time student, that is a student usually will be taking 12 or more units of credit. So this is somebody who is probably taking between 3 and 4 courses. General education requirements. So these are requirements that must be fulfilled. These are sort of the basic education requirements that you undertake before going into a major. A lot of students will go to community colleges first to complete general education requirements, and then transfer to a 4-year college. So this is like basic English, basic biology, basic math, and things like that. HIPAA form, the HIPAA release form, is a lot like the FERPA form, and that has to do with health information. And that is something you would most certainly want to talk with your students about before they go off to college. And you would want to sign a release, not only for the student's health center, but if you are part of a medical plan or a hospital nearby, you want to make sure that that is taken care of. An independent study, that is usually involves working with a professor independently on a topic of interest that is defined by the student and by the professor in tandem usually. So it's not a class that's necessarily advertised, and it's usually done one-on-one. In-state student, this is really for the purposes of tuition and financial aid. So with the public universities, not so much with the private universities, or interestingly with extension. So for example, if you are coming from Italy, or if you're coming from Little Italy, to us, you pay the same amount. But for tuition for undergraduates and graduate students, you will find that in-state students pay a lot less. This also becomes important when we are talking about DACA students, or we're talking about students who come from abroad. So an in-state student, usually there also is a residency requirement on the campus that you'd want to make sure to look at. So if you are thinking of sending your kids to University of Wisconsin or University of Texas, Arlington, this is something that you would want to take a close look at. A lab or a section and a lecture. So a lecture is usually done, at least in the University of California, this is done in rather large halls by a tenured or a tenure track professor. This will happen maybe 3 times a week for an hour. And this is the professor, him or herself, that is giving a lecture to a large audience. Now, usually each of these large classes are accompanied by what we call a section or a lab that is made up of smaller groups of learners, often guided by a teaching assistant who is a graduate student, or a research assistant in the case of a laboratory experience. So you will most definitely find, at least in the first 2 years, maybe even in the 3rd year, that your son or daughter will take a combination of lecture and lab, or lecture and section. Oftentimes, it is the TA who is going to form the more significant relationship with your son or daughter, at least academically speaking, and oftentimes will clarify what is going on in the lecture. A major, that is basically a course of study. So you can think of a major majoring in English, majoring in the arts, majoring in social sciences, majoring in political science. So this is the primary course of study. These days, there are a lot more interdisciplinary majors. So if you are interested, let's say, in political economy, or if you are interested in the economics of healthcare, there is a way to build out a custom major. A minor is a secondary course of study. So you may be majoring in public administration and minoring in education, which is sort of a secondary interest that is intertwined with your major interest. Or you may be majoring in business with a minor in the arts. So it's a secondary emphasis. A meal plan, that is for students who live in dormitories. That is basically what is part of your room and board, your housing allowance. All of the colleges and universities and even some voc tech schools have these. So we have dining halls which have become much better over the course of the years. And I think if you come to visit at UC San Diego, you will find that the dining halls are much more like Michelin star restaurants than they are like cafeterias, although there are still these big silos of cereal for those who don't want to wait. Part-time student, again, important to know the difference between full-time student and part-time student, because if your son or daughter is on a financial aid package, making adjustments or falling below full-time status will impact that. So a part-time student is usually one who is not enrolled at the university full-time, meaning that they are probably taking 2 classes rather than the required 4 per quarter or semester. Again, important because it impacts financial aid. Pass-fail, that is a course in which you do not get an official grade like A, B, C, D, or F. Instead, it is you either pass the class or you fail the class. At times, this will have implications for things like applying to graduate school where a GPA is needed. Plagiarism, that is undertaking somebody's work and representing it as your own. Plagiarism these days has become very sophisticated to the point where the universities will use computer algorithms to detect plagiarism, and they can pinpoint the exact source. Even if it was another student, they're very good at identifying that. President, much like a chancellor, at some point, the president is the chief administrator of the entire system. So for example, our president at the University of California is Dr. Michael Drake, and he oversees the entirety of our 10 campus system. Whereas each of our campuses are overseen by a chancellor. Quarter, that's really quarter and semester. Those are academic calendars. So an academic quarter lasts about 10 weeks. So those universities that are on the quarter system, which are most of the University of California campuses, means things fly by quickly and things are very intensive and intense. Whereas a semester usually is 2 quarters, it's about half a year, and there is a little bit more time to get things done. Registration, this is the process by which you enroll in the university officially and you choose classes. Usually this is spring and fall. In some cases, you can register during the winter quarter. And if you're going through extended studies, you can almost register at any time. But registration can be somewhat of a laborious process. It certainly was when I was going to school, when we actually had to stand in long lines and actually fill out forms in front of people. Two types of RAs: the research assistant, who is much like a teaching assistant, except works on research projects rather than delivers curriculum. And then there's the resident assistant, who works in the dormitory. So somebody who's there to support residents and who is either a graduate student or an alumnus, and at sometimes an upper division student who works in the dorms to make sure that things flow smoothly. Room and board, those are costs that are associated with life on campus. Do you have to have both room and board? No, not necessarily. At some campuses, I know where my wife is at USD, you can buy a meal plan without having to live on campus. Study abroad. Study abroad is just what it sounds like. Usually it means a semester or a quarter at an institution out of the country. It usually does not mean doing a whole degree abroad. That's something different, but this gives the opportunity to go and undertake university work in another country. For some majors, that actually might be required, and for some graduate degrees, it is required to have an experience abroad. Teaching assistant, those are the graduate students, sometimes upper level undergraduates, but more so graduate students who will be leading the smaller sections associated with a lecture. Transcripts, that is your academic record. So that has everything on it. What grades did you get? What courses did you withdraw from? When did you complete your degree? All of that will be found on transcripts. It used to be that transcripts had to be ordered and mailed. Now it is all done electronically. Transfer credits, incredibly, incredibly important. So if you are thinking of your son or daughter is thinking of going to a community college, or maybe a private university, or a voc tech school, these are credits that can be accepted at another institution. So usually with community colleges and universities, there is an articulation plan where they've identified which credits can transfer and how they transfer. Tuition should be familiar to everybody. That is the cost that you pay to enroll in the university, as the fees that are associated with mere enrollment and taking classes. It does not include things like materials or cost of living. Undergraduate, that is the first 4 years before you earn a bachelor's degree. So if you are undertaking an associate's degree, that your first 2 years, you are an undergraduate student. If you are undertaking a bachelor's, your first 4 are undergraduates. Waitlist is like it sounds. If you are either signed up for a major, or if you're signed up for admissions, or if you are signed up for a class and find yourself on a wait list, basically that means that you are now in line to take it. Withdrawal, you can withdraw from the university, you can withdraw from a class. When we talk about withdrawal on transcripts, that's usually because you've missed the drop deadline. So instead of a grade, you will receive a W to indicate withdrawal. And work study, that is a type of financial aid that allows a student to work as an undergraduate, but the work that you do is on the campus with an affiliated unit. So for example, we have work study students at Extension who are undergraduates. Now, I know that our time draws a little bit close here, but wanted you to think of some questions. These are not things you may ask directly, but things that you'd want to know, things these are key questions for your son or daughter in the first years of college. And this can actually go right up to graduation. Are you going to class? Are you studying at least 25 hours per week? That is the average suggested study time. Are you reviewing the material every week? Are you balancing study time with downtime? And we talked about the importance of that in stress management. Do you know when the last day to withdraw from a class is? You'd be surprised. It is plastered all over the place, and students will claim, well, nobody ever told me. Are you starting your assignments early? We know the dangers of procrastination. Have you seen your advisor? Always make sure that they work with their advisors, because you don't want to be in your 4th year of undergraduate study and find out that maybe you won't get to graduate because you forgot to complete something. Have you gone to your professor's office hours? Not always necessary, but most professors will open up their offices to be able to talk with students about questions they have or concerns they have about a course. Are you going to need any tutoring? Again, we want to make sure we are reinforcing help-seeking behavior, which is so difficult at this age at which our sons and daughters want to establish independence. And have you formed a study group? And maybe not formed a study group, but at least have you participated in a study group? Again, you may not want to ask these directly, but these are things that as you're having conversations, you may want to bring up subtly. So some closing advice for our wonderful parent scholars, that your role as parents hasn't ended. Even though they are adults, it hasn't ended, but it has changed a bit. So number one, learn to let go. The relationship is going to change. Offer a longer lead. Stay loosely connected, but stay connected. Share your own experiences with your kids. Even if you haven't yourself gone to college or done an apprenticeship, talk about this time in your life with them, because it helps them find somebody with whom they can identify. Make sure that you can find balance. And I don't mean a work-life balance, but find a balance between the way that you relate to your kids that is more interdependent than it is codependent. Help with problem solving versus solving problems. Don't continue to solve problems, but guide them through the process. Again, be a good sounding board for them. Recognize that this is a time of ambivalence for all parents. You may not know how to feel. So if your kid is going away for a gap year, or is taking a job, or is moving out of the house, recognize that, first of all, you're not alone, but most parents will not know how to feel about this. And think about your parting words. What are your words as your kid goes out the door, even if they're just going to a local institution or getting a job nearby? What are your parting words, because they're significant? And recognize that this is a time of ambivalence for you, but your kids are also going to have conflicting emotions. They're becoming adults, they are becoming more independent, but they are still tied to you in a very important way. Talk to your kids about how you'll keep in touch. Doesn't mean you have to write up an official schedule, but talk about it. Should I expect a phone call every week? How are we going to communicate? Should we text? That sort of thing. Always ask about courses rather than focusing on grades. That was my father's favorite thing to do. He didn't care what I was learning. He cared about what I was getting. More important to talk about the courses and the new experiences they've encountered. And understand that these years after high school, again, whether it's a gap year or an apprenticeship or a attendance at a university, it's a time to explore. It's a time to find new things. Some other things, if you're sending your kids away to college, make sure that you understand what the COVID-19 protocols are, and they change frequently. This is also a good time to research or research majors. Have your kids polish their people and social skills. The way that they relate to a new roommate or professors is going to be very much different, perhaps, than the friends they have now. Embrace time management skills and think about working freshman year. Is this the time that you want to do so? And if it is, you may want to explore work study versus what I did, which was a full-time job. And a few don'ts, some things to be careful about. Don't get carried away in hysterics, and that might be difficult because the feelings are very intensive, but you may want to present them a little more subtly. Do not redecorate immediately. My mom could not wait until I moved out so she could have her own knitting room. So when I came back home for the weekend, I didn't have a place except for the couch, and the cat had the couch, so I had the floor. We're still connected to you, especially during our first year. So redecorating just sort of makes us feel as though we may not be as welcome as we had believed. Don't always blame the roommate. It's very easy to say, well, look at the person you're living with, no wonder. Don't offer, well, you can offer wake-up calls, but don't make wake-up calls. So this idea that if you want to make sure that your kids go to class, don't call them every morning at 6 and say, are you up? Are you up? Are you up? Do not call their professors. You will first hear a lecture about FERPA, and it is likely that their professors will be somewhat irritated. Don't be impatient. That's a double negative to say, do be patient. And it can be trying sometimes. I absolutely know I've been on both sides of the coin, but definitely be patient. Don't fight the uncomfortable. If you're feeling uncomfortable, embrace the discomfort and know that you all will get through it. And don't wait for them to need help. We talk about the importance of your sons or daughters engaging in problem solving and solving their own problems. But be vigilant. When you sense that something's not right, make sure you start talking to them about it. That does not mean that you have to solve the problem, but it means that you call their attention to it or offer assistance. You can't cure homesickness at home. So, you want to make sure that your son or your daughter has the survival skills to live out in the world. So if they're feeling homesick, you keep bringing them home all the time, they'll never want to leave again. It's important for them to grow and to be independent. Sometimes surprise visits are okay, but constant surprise visits are not recommended. Surprise packages, surprise gifts, yes, but when it comes to surprise visits, you never know what the kids are going to be up to on campus. There may be lectures, there may be social events. So, do them the courtesy of checking their schedule, and don't stalk them on social media to find out what's going on. Have meaningful conversations with them. And I want to conclude because this whole series was based in the stories of Odysseus and wanting to come home to Ithaca. And when we talked about Ithaca as home, we talked about home meaning several things. So I will conclude with this quote from Madeline Miller from her book Circe about Odysseus. He talked so often of longing for us and for home, but it was lies. When he was back on Ithaca, he was never content, always looking to the horizon. Once we were his again, he wanted something else. And this is not to say that your son or your daughter won't love you in the same way or value the time that you have together, but it means that they're always looking for something new and always looking for something different. And this post-secondary journey is just the first step on that pathway. And no matter where they go on their chosen path, do remember that you will be along with them. And knowing that they are uneasy and wanting more is really a good thing and a testimony to your parenting skills. So I know our time is somewhat limited. I think our time may be up. So I'll welcome back Mr. Dominguez for any closing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Appel. I hope you can hear me.
I can.
Okay, awesome. We do have some questions on the chat. We will be sending those out to you, and then we will post those on our website, on our Parent University website for everybody to be able to see. I just want to thank you very much. I think, listening to your conversation, it reminded me a lot of my college experience. I did a lot of the things that you are mentioning within your presentation, which is I did the work study, the study abroad. I went off to college, right? But it's important for parents to be there for their students in a listening, manner, because this is going to be a new experience for a lot of our students. So a lot of our students are going to have questions. We here at Sweetwater Union High School District. We will be here for our students even after they graduate. So if any parent, something happens and, needs some advice, some guidance, we will be here to support you. So just know that as well. But I just want to thank you once again for your wonderful presentation. We will be posting this on the YouTube channel, as well as continuing to answer those questions as they get posted onto our different ways of getting questions to us, which one of them is, once again, through that Parent University website. But as I said, we are actually out of time. If you have any questions, parents, keep posting them on the chat. I'll stay around for a little bit longer so that I can capture more questions. Otherwise, that link will also work and it will continue to work. Any final words, Dr. Appel?
Yes, again, I am in an absolute state of disbelief that we are already at our 8th session. I remember us talking about, well, what will this series look like? And I am grateful to all of you, of course, to Ms. Simmons for being a steadfast part of this and making the experience that much better. And I will also echo your sentiments. So even parents, if you don't send your kids to UC San Diego, if they wind up in apprenticeship programs or gap year programs or at Cal States or California community colleges, out of state or out of country, please know that we are a resource for you. You have my email address. You can contact me at any time. And again, I just want to express my gratitude to everyone at Sweetwater Union High School District, but really to thank again the administration, Mr. Dominguez, Ms. Simmons, Ms. Delgado, Ms. Martinez, and everybody who made this possible, because I always learn more from the parents than they could ever hope to learn from me. And I hope to see you all next time.
Thank you, Dr. Appel. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you.